their printer uses a good cover stock where the spine bends without like creasing very easily. So pick it up if you're into classic action sci-fi manga. It's fantastic. Let's go. Let's go.
I'm at the part where Ito and Sakura fight. Like, they finished, right? They're talking it out.
Hey, check out these guns. Fuck
Tenzin
yeah.
and Tamari were managed to fight each other
Yo.
right here.
Why the hell am I wearing a red shirt, man?
You fucking
Wardrobe!
flip over,
I'm gonna
they
need
have the
wardrobe
thing,
like
and then,
right now.
look, shut down.
Radioactive thing's eye was not
And
in
then
the
you look
script,
at, and then
Andre.
she's fucking
What
dead.
is in the script is my
Where the fuck was
cryptid
the
army
fight?
tearing you to shreds.
There was, in the anime, there was a whole ass fight. Like
Agony
they just
and
grabbed
fear
it.
in those eyes, while your blood
And like,
pours onto the set. Action!
Stop what you're doing and stop Spider-Man. Wait, have you? Miles Morales, he's entering sector 4.
We have a few volumes coming from Ablaze. First up.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I left the place where I live to go to another place and consume a form of media that is, in fact, not a music. Rather, I did a thing where I use my eyes, but also the ears. They're not up here, they're down here. Yep, use the ears as well to hear, and again, with the eyes seeing, a series of moving pictures, aka a film. I know the last time I spoke on this topic, we were, on the subject of something a little weird, the massive 3-hour anxiety epic that is Ari Aster's I Was Afraid. But this time we're talking about something that's a bit more approachable. That's the new Spider-Man film, Across the Spider-Verse, which is the sequel to the 2018 movie Spider-Man Into.
I didn't.
The Spider-Verse. This is exciting because currently the third film I imagine is the bow that ties up the narrative of these films. The next one, Beyond the Spider-Verse, is going to be dropping next year. God, I'm excited to see that movie. As soon as the film was over, I was like, man, the world better not end before the last freaking one comes out. Because dang it, it is that good, it's that intense, it blew me away that much, it had me on the edge of my seat almost the entire time. Let's get into it. Now look, I'll preface this spiel by saying, generally, I'm not really into comic book movies. I mean, of course, I like a Batman here and there. Tom Holland, I thought, was a pretty good Spider-Man in the live-action film series. I dig on some X-Men. I have peeped a Marvel movie or two, but these days, if you asked me, like, Anthony, what do you think about what's going on in the MCU? I don't freaking know. I don't got no idea. I don't care. They could just be all pooping and peeing and farting for 2 hours and playing with each other's pee and poop and farts. I would have no idea. I do know one thing for sure, though. That's not what's happening in this Spider-Man movie. That's not what's happening here. As I said, This is the sequel to the 2018 film Into the Spider-Verse, which the moment I saw the trailer for this movie, I knew that I kind of had to see it. Because, I mean, if we could show at least, a few stills or visuals or something, like, I just found the art style of this film to be really visually pleasing and beautiful and just, kind of very stimulating for an animated comic book movie. And for sure, Into the Spider-Verse and all the films in this series were not the first animated comic book film or show to exist, and they won't be the last, but I just thought that what I was seeing and what I experienced with this movie was like just kind of living in and being fully immersed in a living and breathing comic. Whether it be, again, other animated stuff or live action stuff, trying to live out the series of a comic or a manga or a visual novel, whatever it be. I just feel like this film is one of the best to do it best, if not the best, in terms of really kind of bridging that gap between the comic book world and reality, because obviously everything you're seeing has so much flair, it's so stylized, it's so hyper colorful and vivid and creative, but the way that the characters move and act, the way they're written, the way they carry themselves, it just reads like real life. I feel like everything I'm seeing is so material. Like I could just reach out and touch it. I could smell it. I could taste it. Watching comic book movies like Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse doesn't just feel like I am experiencing a illustrated medium on a page or even on a screen. I just feel like I'm looking at a window into another world. So again, when I originally saw the art style of the first film, I was dying to see it because it just looked beautiful and looked interesting. I also thought that however they would handle the story would be of interest for me because of all of the controversy and hubbub that was generated years prior over the idea of, there being a new Spider-Man franchise and introducing, a black Spider-Man in the process of doing that. Guys like Donald Glover were sort of talked about around those discussions. He has a very funny and entertaining cameo in this new movie over here that I thought was a great inclusion. There are also some other parts of the movie where, you kind of see these characters living in like a real life, live action type situation, or interacting with characters that are live action in some way, shape, or form, which just adds to the hyper realism. But yeah, I just thought there was a lot of stunning and beautiful visual artistry that went into the first film, even with it, again, comic book movie, and with a lot of the sections and scenes of the movie being very silly and lighthearted. While the first film did introduce, the idea of this multi-dimensional Spider-Verse where you have, different Spider-Man characters living out their separate Spider-Man lives, which is a cool little sci-fi concept and angle, and I thought all of that just played out really well.
What happened there?
Really tastefully, and along the way, every scene, every single thing visually was just stunning and breathtaking the more that you look at it. Now, with that being said, because I was so impressed with the first film, I went into the second one with super, super, super high expectations. And honestly, I would say that those expectations were met and exceeded, even with there being a switch in directors this time around for the new film. There were some additional writers added into the mix as well, and from everything that I could see experiencing the film, not a beat was skipped. We're just thrown right back into the Spider-Verse, pretty much where we left off, and I think if this film does anything well, it's really kind of expanding the breadth and the personality of the characters and the world that we were first introduced to in the original movie. Okay, there are going to be some light spoilers in this video in kind of going over, some major plot points, so be warned. This new movie, a lot like the first one, kind of kicks off with an introduction. We are given essentially the origin story of Spider-Gwen. Many of these plot points are rushed through. They're said very matter-of-factly because she's kind of telling her life story in, a very plain and straightforward way, but I implore everybody watching this to really pay attention to everything, because this movie works in crazy amounts of layers and callbacks because of all of the different, dimensions and universes and Spider-Man characters overlapping with each other. So there are moments here that if you're not paying attention, you'll miss how her origin story sort of impacts a lot of what happens later in the movie. So again, be on top of everything flying by you at a million miles a minute here. Of course, everything we see in this Gwen introduction, just like with the first movie, is visually stunning, breathtaking, gorgeous. Once we get this setup through, we pretty much go back to Miles Morales to see essentially what his life has been like since becoming Spider-Man, since everything we saw in the first movie. We learn more about him, we learn more about him coming into his own as a superhero, we learn more about his family, his regular life obligations that he's also trying to balance while being a superhero. This movie, I think, does an even better job of making him seem like, not just like a well-written character, but like a real person who you can truly relate to. And once we're off and running with this and we have a whiff of what Miles' current state is, then the Spider-Verse and pretty much everything happening with the plot pretty much causes Gwen and Miles to collide again. That's when the movie really kind of expands upon its multiverse concept that the first movie introduced us to, and it does it really well, really creatively, and in an entertaining fashion. As well. I think a lot of haters and naysayers who were not into the first movie or into, the concept or the idea of a black Spider-Man character kind of saw the multiverse concept as, just like a cheap way to just basically make the series more inclusive or, get like some diversity bucks in their pocket or whatever. But when you actually look at the richness and the depth of the sci-fi world that the writers in this film are trying to create on this movie, you can really tell, no, they actually care about this idea and care about this concept and are interested in toying with it in the most absurd and just out there way possible, really kind of bordering on something along the lines of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which if you haven't seen that movie with its very unique explorations of things like multiverses and alternate dimensions, I recommend that you do, because there are some really cool parallels between these two films, and if you like this one, I think you like that one as well. Both play with the idea very interestingly that you can have these different dimensions impacting each other in a super negative way, in a way that's high stakes, in a way that causes you to sort of have a lot of introspection, to think about your own life and the way that's going, where things are leading you, but also they throw in a lot of kind of absurd ideas as well, because in an alternate Spider-Man universe, you can have a cowboy Spider-Man with a horse that also has a mask and just like fucking shooting webs and shit. You could have a UK punk rock Spider-Man. You could have a big husky thick Spider-Man. Because I have seen some people reacting negatively to this movie, pointing at things like, oh, you have a pregnant Spider-Man who's riding a motorcycle in this movie. That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. But if you look at the actual movie, that character is not even the weirdest Spider-Man you see on the screen. There are loads of insane Spider-Man characters that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, and that's kind of the point. They're trying to show you with an amazing amount of specificity and creatively just how diverse the multiverse can be in terms of these various Spider-Man characters just kind of leading different lives and coming from different walks of life. And the versions of New York that they come from are all wildly different as well. And again, the writers, the animators play with this idea in a really interesting way. Now, with that being said, things start to coalesce with the storyline when the idea is introduced that all these Spider-Man characters, despite the fact that they are so different in a variety of different ways, within their lives, within their storylines, as it were, in their various multiverses, they're all kind of subject to a series of very tragic core experiences. And again, despite them being very different in terms of just, visual and personality, they're all kind of being subject to mostly the same stuff to make them, the superheroes and characters that they currently are. Okay, again, warning, I'm going to talk about another big spoiler here, but I'm not going to get too deep into it to the point where it ruins the movie or anything like that. But it's at this point that we learn
Be more
that Miles
patient.
Morales is like, an anomaly in this whole Spider-Verse. We sort of learned that he wasn't supposed to be a Spider-Man, and the spider that bit him did so kind of as a fluke. At least that's what the film tells us, because there's a lot of things about the Spider-Verse that isn't quite making sense, and not in a way where it, kind of like kneecaps the film or makes it worse or makes it kind of difficult to watch. There are moments where purposefully the writers want you to kind of question the validity of what you're being told in terms of the validity of the Spider-Verse, what can and cannot be done in the Spider-Verse, because Miles Morales himself is kind of questioning the validity of all of this too, because he's essentially being told by other characters, by the storyline, by the world surrounding him, that, this is going to happen, and that's got to happen, and this is your destiny. All of this is pretty much foretold, and you continuing to do what you want to do, it's just kind of messing everything up, and you can't do that, you can't do this. I bring this up and I spoil this to say that the film, in a lot of ways, ends up becoming a couple different things. You have a really elaborate version of the trolley problem here, because, you have Miles wanting to sort of do what he wants to do and make the changes he wants to make for his own well-being and his loved ones, while simultaneously there is the threat of there being multiple lives and maybe multiple dimensions lost as a result of him just kind of being like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do me. On top of that, the film also becomes a meta-commentary on Miles Morales, the character, and the way, a black Spider-Man was received conceptually by audiences, because he wasn't supposed to be, and he's the anomaly, he's the original anomaly. Also, in toying with this multi-dimensional concept, the writers decided to introduce into this film as kind of a main villain, the Spot, which, again, for this whole Spider-Verse thing, I think is a great villain choice and idea. I don't want to spoil too much more of the plot, so I'll say this and maybe round things up a little bit by once again stating the visual art style of the film, again, is consistent, and in this one, amazing. There are actually some parts where I think they went the distance and pushed past what they were able to accomplish with the last film. Like, there's one scene that I thought was actually kind of visually mind-blowing, where Gwen is talking to her father, and in the background you sort of see the place that they're in a very surreal way getting really melty, like it's all watercolors or something. And the further they get into this very emotional conversation, the more the world behind them just kind of becomes drippy and unrealistic, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of very tasty eye candy throughout the film, just like that. It just sort of depends on what scene you're watching, what the emotional tone of a certain scene is, what the vibe is, what's going on plot-wise. You've really just got to catch it in the moment that it happens. And again, that scene that I just mentioned is one of many that took me by surprise, and was just again, something that left a mark on me. So yeah, again, with the art style, I think they went above and beyond. The movie also leaves us on a big, gigantic, fat, just massive, crushing cliffhanger. Actually, one of the biggest cliffhangers I've seen in a mainstream movie in a long time. But it's a pretty gratifying one, because there's some huge revelations that happen right at the end of this film. Ones that, again, I don't want to spoil because I think it'll ruin things too much. Even though some of what occurred I did see happening, the characters are so well written, the pacing of the film is so good, the visuals are so stunning that even when it was happening, I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. The predictability of it doesn't really matter, because the characters were so well put together that I was just that emotionally invested in what was going on as it was happening. So yeah, the plot essentially leaves us with a big fat question mark. The movie is over 2 hours long, so it's a pretty dense watch as well for a comic book movie, especially one that is so visually overstimulating. And it's so much to take in and see all at once, just too much to process, but that kind of makes me want to see the movie again and again and again. So yeah, art style, visually stunning, plot, again, edge of my seat. Characters well written. The reintroduction of like the original Peter Parker and Miles' family and so on and so forth, that goes well. The tone of the movie was great throughout. It had amazing visual gags, very snappy dialogue and writing, just a great balance of drama and action and comedy, and even through that sort of making some meta commentary on the movie itself and the Spider-Man series, as there's a funny part where one of the Spider-Man characters is, quite serious, and they use that as kind of a way to dig at the idea. Does Spider-Man have to be silly? Does Spider-Man have to be funny? I feel like it's kind of a requirement that Spider-Man be quippy and sort of tongue-in-cheek all the time. So again, there are a lot of very witty parts of the film that seem like a dissection of the idea of Spider-Man itself. So if you're a fan who's just like really deep into Spider-Man lore, seeing this movie go into that and pull that apart and, in a way, make a satire and even a very smart critique of that in the way that it does, I think should be very entertaining. Again, for anybody who's a hardcore fan. There were some parts of the movie, I will say, where I was like sitting in the chair, fighting back tears. Like there are genuinely parts that fucked me up. I guess I just want to say I highly recommend it. I think it's a really good movie. And again, came into this thing with super high expectations, given how great the first film was. Not generally a comic book movie addict, but this series I make an exception for. Very much looking forward to Beyond the Spider-Verse when that comes out. And fire. Awesome. Great film. Loved it. Super entertaining, stimulating, funny, smart, emotionally impactful too. Very nice musical inclusions from Metro Boomin throughout the movie as well that were incorporated tastefully. And I think that's everything that I want to say about this right now. If you guys have seen the movie, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Are you crazy about it? Did it blow you away? Did it do anything for you? Did you think it was mid? Let me know. Cool? Cool. Mwah. You're the best. Anthony Fantano over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up for the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano.
Be who you are. Hey, does he know a little? What should I know? Oh, looks like he did not know.
The global phenomenon. On Sunday night, the Los Angeles Lakers wrapped up this long and grueling season with the championship. A storybook ending for LeBron, AD, and the Lakers organization. And now that the season is over, I wanted to take a deep dive into something that has been circulating over the last few days. This championship being one of the easiest to win in recent years. Not only did I crunch the numbers to find out if there was any truth to this claim, the result that I got is one you have to see to believe. With LeBron claiming his fourth ring, the tone among NBA fans hasn't changed much. Some people love to see it.
I have YouTube installed. I'm like unpause it. Why?
don't. With LeBron claiming his fourth ring, the tone among NBA fans hasn't changed much. Some people love to see it, others don't. This was about as predictable as it gets, hence the title of my last video. With many NBA fans saying this season was so different and unconventional that this particular championship should have an asterisk next to it, or as some call it, the Mickey Mouse Rec League Championship. But looking at this from an objective point of view, where does this championship run rank all time in terms of difficulty? What championship team had the hardest run to a title, and which championship team had the easiest run? Well, I started this search for the ultimate championship run and quickly came across this Reddit post from 4 years ago. This Reddit user came up with a simple way of measuring the difficulty of a team's title run by using an advanced stat called the Simple Rating System, or SRS. This stat measures a team's margin of victory throughout the season adjusted for strength of schedule. Basically, this stat
Damn, with that
quantifies
shot, that's
how good a team is.
crazy.
For example, this season the Bucks had the highest SRS in the entire league of 9.41, followed by the Clippers, Lakers, and Raptors. Just like any other stat, it has its flaws, but overall it's a great indicator of how great or terrible a team is. He then added up the total SRS values for every team that each championship team beat in the playoffs. For example, in 2017, the Warriors beat the Blazers, Jazz, Spurs, and Cavaliers. Add up the SRS scores for each of those teams, and the difficulty of the Warriors' 2017 championship run is 13.77. So now that we understand how this all works, here is the list of championship runs ranked in terms of difficulty, with the 1995 Rockets having the most difficult path to a championship and the 1987 Lakers having the easiest path to a championship. This list only includes championships dating back to the 1984 season, since that is when the 16-team playoff system was introduced. So, with the last 37 championship teams listed, where do the 2020 Lakers land? All the way down at 35th. In the last 37 seasons, only 2 championship teams faced easier competition than the Lakers faced in this season's playoffs. In my last video, I talked about how the Lakers' path to a title this season was no easier than any other championship teams. And I literally could not have been more wrong. Not only was their path easy, it was nearly the easiest path of
He
the
could
last
do more
37
shit than that.
seasons. But let's take a deeper look into some of these numbers. The first thing that jumped out at me was that the Shaq and Kobe Lakers three-peat featured 3 of the top 5 most difficult paths to a championship. That is unbelievable. And even crazier is that in 2001, the Lakers nearly swept the playoffs, going 15-1, while facing the second most difficult opponents in the process. So if you've ever wondered what team was the most dominant in the last 35 seasons, I think there is your answer. Now, if we highlight each decade, then we can see which 10-year span featured the most difficult runs to a championship. And for the most part, each decade had similar levels of difficulty, except the 80s. But this was because for most of the 80s, the league only had 23 teams, which meant a 16-team playoff format featured many teams with losing records. Simply put, the league was still good, but it was super top-heavy with bad teams making the playoffs.
Here we go.
With that being said, it's still shocking just how easy it was to get deep into the playoffs in the 80s. So, you know how the NBA has been a bit one-sided throughout recent history in terms of talent level in each conference? Well, this next graphic highlights just that. When graphing the most difficult paths to a championship using SRS scores on the y-axis, you can see that the West has won 4 of the 5 toughest championships since 1984. The West has also won
That's so dumb.
12 of the 20 most difficult
I was feeling
titles.
good there too. What killed me? I meant to fight it away. Man. Here's where I don't. Here's the What? A zombie spawned on me? Yeah. That's enough draw fleas for now.